The coffee machine at Miller's Diner had been gurgling the same tired tune for 23 years, and nobody in the town of Ashford Springs figured it would ever stop. That's just how things rolled in their corner of Pennsylvania, predictable, comfortable, boring as hell if you asked the younger crowd. Marcus Webb sat at the counter like he did every Tuesday morning, scrolling through his phone while his eggs got cold, completely oblivious that in about 4 hours, he'd be fighting for his life with a tire iron. His sister, Jamie, was across town at the elementary school, setting up her classroom for another day of teaching third graders their multiplication tables. Their dad, Robert, was already at the hardware store he'd owned for 30 years, organizing paint cans by color because that's what you did when business was slow. None of them had any clue that their peaceful little existence was about to go straight to hell. The first weird thing happened around 9:30. Deputy Travis Coleman got a call about some homeless guy causing a disturbance behind the grocery store. Nothing unusual there. Ashford Springs had its share of folks down on their luck, and Travis had given out more warnings than he could count. But when he pulled up behind Murphy's Market, what he saw made his hand drift toward his service weapon without thinking. The man wasn't just acting strange, he was twitching and jerking like someone had plugged him into an electrical socket. His skin looked gray, almost greenish in the morning light, and when he turned to face Travis, his eyes were completely milked over, white as fresh snow. "Sir, I need you to calm down," Travis said, keeping his voice steady even though his gut was screaming at him that something was seriously wrong. The man didn't respond, just made this god-awful groaning sound that didn't seem human. Then he charged. Travis barely got out of the way, stumbling backward as the man lunged at him with his arms outstretched, fingers curled into claws. The deputy's training kicked in, and he grabbed his taser, firing it into the man's chest. The probes hit dead center, 50,000 volts coursing through the guy's body, but he didn't even flinch. He just kept coming, that horrible moan rattling from his throat. Travis's heart hammered against his ribs as he backed toward his cruiser, yelling for the man to stop, but it was like shouting at a brick wall. When the attacker got within arm's reach, Travis did what he'd been trained to do. He put the guy down hard, tackling him to the pavement. It took everything he had to get the cuffs on, and even restrained, the man kept thrashing and snapping his teeth, trying to bite anything he could reach. Travis had arrested plenty of people high on meth or bath salts, but this was different. This was something else entirely. Back at the diner, Marcus finally left his cold eggs and headed to his job at the construction site on the edge of town. He worked for Donnelly Construction, a crew of about 15 guys who'd been building a new shopping complex for the past 6 months. His best friend, Derek Martinez, was already there, sitting on a stack of lumber and complaining about his girlfriend. "I'm telling you, man, she's driving me nuts with this wedding planning," Derek said, running a hand through his dark hair. "We haven't even set a date, and she's already got 3 binders full of cake pictures." "3 binders, Marcus. Who needs that many cakes?" Marcus laughed, grabbing his tool belt from his truck. "Dude, you proposed. You knew what you were getting into." They were still joking around when the foreman, Big Mike Patterson, called everyone together for the morning briefing. Mike was built like a refrigerator and had a voice that could probably shatter windows, but he was fair and the crew respected him. "All right, listen up," Mike bellowed. "We're behind schedule on the north wing, so we're gonna push hard today. I want the framing done by Friday, no excuses." The guys got to work, the sounds of hammers and saws filling the air, country music blasting from someone's radio. It was just another Tuesday, exactly like every other Tuesday, until around 11 o'clock when they heard screaming. Marcus looked up from the wall he was framing to see people running from the gas station across the street. Not jogging, not hurrying, full-on sprinting like their lives depended on it. "What the hell?" Derek muttered, setting down his nail gun. They watched as a woman stumbled out of the gas station, blood streaming down her arm, her face twisted in terror. Behind her came 3 more people, but there was something wrong with the way they moved, jerky and uncoordinated, like marionettes with tangled strings. The woman tripped and fell, and before anyone could react, the three figures were on her, and Marcus had to look away because what happened next was something he'd only seen in horror movies. "Holy shit, we gotta help her!" Derek shouted, already running toward the scene. Marcus and several other guys followed, grabbing whatever they could use as weapons: 2x4s, hammers, a crowbar. Big Mike was yelling something about calling 911, his phone already pressed to his ear. By the time they reached the gas station, the woman had stopped screaming. The three attackers looked up, their faces smeared with blood, their eyes that same milky white Travis had seen earlier. One of them used to be the gas station attendant, a kid named Tommy who couldn't have been more than 19. Now Tommy looked like death warmed over, his skin pale and clammy, dark veins spiderwebbing across his face. "Tommy?" Marcus said, his voice cracking. "What the hell, man?" Tommy didn't answer, just lurched toward them with his arms outstretched and that terrible groaning sound bubbling from his throat. Derek swung first, catching Tommy in the shoulder with a 2x4. The impact would have dropped any normal person, but Tommy barely staggered. He kept coming, and the other two were moving now too, spreading out like they were hunting. "They're on something," one of the construction workers shouted, a guy named Pete who'd been on the crew for years. "We gotta get out of here." But it was too late for running. The things, because Marcus's brain was refusing to call them people anymore, were closing in fast. He swung his hammer, connecting with the nearest one's head with a sickening crunch. The thing went down but started getting back up almost immediately. His stomach lurched. This wasn't right. Nothing about this was right. Derek was backing up, his 2x4 held like a baseball bat, his face white as a sheet. "Marcus, man, we gotta go. We gotta go right now." They ran back to the construction site, but Big Mike was already waving everyone to the trucks. "Move your asses," he roared. "Something's going down in town. Police scanners going crazy. Multiple attacks, multiple casualties." The crew didn't need to be told twice. They piled into trucks and personal vehicles, engines roaring to life. Marcus jumped into Derek's pickup, and they peeled out of the lot, heading toward downtown. The radio was broadcasting an emergency alert, the robotic voice cutting through the static. "This is not a test. Residents of Ashford Springs are advised to stay indoors and lock all doors and windows. Do not approach anyone exhibiting signs of illness or aggressive behavior. Emergency services are responding. This is not a test." Derek's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. "Dude, what the hell is happening? Did you see that? Did you see what they were doing to that woman?" Marcus didn't answer because he didn't have an answer. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. Downtown Ashford Springs looked like a war zone. Cars were abandoned in the middle of the street, some with doors still open and engines running. Store windows were smashed, and Marcus could see people running in every direction, some screaming, others eerily silent. A police car sat sideways across Main Street, lights still flashing, but no sign of the officer. Derek slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting a man stumbling across the road, but then they saw his face, gray skin, white eyes, blood dripping from his mouth, and Derek hit the gas instead, swerving around the thing. "We gotta find Jamie," Marcus said, his voice tight with panic. "The elementary school. We gotta make sure she's okay." Derek nodded and yanked the wheel, taking a hard left toward Ashford Elementary. The school was only a few blocks away, but those blocks felt like miles as they navigated through the chaos. At the school, Jamie Webb was trying to keep 28 third graders calm while the world fell apart outside. She'd heard the emergency alert on her phone, followed by frantic texts from other teachers asking if anyone knew what was going on. The principal, Mrs. Eleanor Vaughn, had activated the lockdown protocol, and now all the classroom doors were locked, blinds drawn, kids huddled in the corner away from the windows. Jamie's hands were steady as she read to her students, her voice calm and soothing, but inside she was terrified. Through the small window in her door, she could see into the hallway, and she'd watched as the janitor, Mr. Phillips, had walked past her room about 10 minutes ago. Except it wasn't Mr. Phillips anymore, not really. He'd moved with that same jerky, unnatural gait she'd seen on the news once when they talked about people on bath salts. His clothes were torn and bloody, and he'd left a smeared handprint on the wall as he passed. One of her students, a little girl named Sophie Martinez, Derek's niece, tugged on Jamie's sleeve. "Miss Webb, I'm scared. Where are our parents coming?" Jamie pulled Sophie into a hug, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Soon, sweetie. Soon. Your mom and dad are probably on their way right now." She hoped that was true. She hoped all their parents were safe and coming for them. But deep down, she had a sinking feeling that things were much worse than anyone wanted to admit. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, at the school. "In the parking lot. Where are you?" Relief flooded through her. Her brother was here. She quickly typed back, "Room 104. Ground floor. East wing. Lockdown. Can't leave the kids." She waited, watching her phone, praying he'd figure out a way to get to them. Outside, Marcus and Derek had found the parking lot mostly empty except for the teachers' cars and a few vehicles that probably belonged to staff. The main entrance was locked, which was good from a security standpoint but bad for getting inside. "There's gotta be another way in," Marcus said, jogging around the side of the building. They found a side door near the gymnasium, also locked. Derek rattled the handle in frustration. Come on, come on." Then they heard glass breaking from somewhere around the front of the school, followed by screaming. They took off running and came around the corner to see a nightmare unfolding. A group of about a dozen of those things, Marcus's brain finally accepted the word zombies, were shambling toward the school's front entrance, where the glass doors had been shattered. 2 of them were already inside. "No way," Derek breathed. "No way, no way, no way." But there was a way, and it was happening right in front of them. Marcus didn't think, just reacted. He grabbed the tire iron from Derek's truck bed and ran toward the entrance. Derek cursed and followed, still clutching his 2x4. They reached the doors just as the 2 zombies were heading down the main hallway toward the classrooms. Marcus could hear kids crying somewhere deeper in the building, and the sound lit a fire in his chest. "Hey," he shouted, his voice echoing off the lockers. "Over here, you ugly bastards." The zombies turned, their milky eyes fixing on him and Derek. One of them had been a woman once, wearing a floral dress now soaked in blood. The other was a teenage boy in a football jersey. They both groaned and started moving toward the 2 men. Marcus met the first one head-on, swinging the tire iron with everything he had. It connected with the zombie's skull with a crack that made his teeth hurt, and the thing went down hard. It didn't get back up. Derek took out the second one, the 2x4 breaking in half from the force of his swing. "That all of them inside?" Marcus panted, his heart hammering. "I think so. But there's more coming." Derek pointed to the parking lot, where the rest of the group was shambling closer. "We gotta barricade this entrance." They worked fast, grabbing whatever they could find, cafeteria tables, filing cabinets, bookcases, and piling it all in front of the shattered doors. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might buy them some time. With the entrance secured, they ran down the hallway toward the east wing. Marcus's phone buzzed with another text from Jamie, "Something's in the hallway. I can hear it outside my door." He ran faster, his boots slapping against the polished floor, Derek right behind him. They rounded the corner to see one of those things, a man in a janitor's uniform, clawing at a classroom door. The small window in the door showed Jamie's face, pale and frightened, kids clustered behind her. The zombie heard them coming and turned, his face a mask of decay and hunger. Marcus didn't slow down. He put his shoulder down and tackled the thing like he was back playing high school football, driving it into the lockers with a crash that echoed down the hall. The zombie's head bounced off the metal with a sickening thud, and it went limp. Jamie unlocked the door and threw it open. "Marcus." She grabbed him in a tight hug, her whole body shaking. "Oh my God, you're okay. You're really here." "I'm here, sis. I got you." He pulled back and looked at the frightened faces of the kids. "We're gonna get you all somewhere safe, I promise." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure where safe was anymore. Derek was already on his phone, trying to reach his fiancée, Melissa. "Come on, pick up. Pick up," he muttered. Finally, she answered, and the relief on his face was palpable. "Mel, baby, where are you?" "Okay, good. Stay there. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in unless you're absolutely sure they're not sick." "Yeah, sick. I'll explain later. I love you too." He hung up and looked at Marcus. "She's at her apartment with her roommate. Says there's chaos everywhere, but they're okay for now." Principal Vaughn appeared in the hallway, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her blouse torn at the shoulder. "Mr. Webb, Mr. Martinez. Thank God you're here. We have 243 students in this building and about 30 staff members. We need to get everyone somewhere more secure." Marcus's mind raced. "What about the gym?" "One entrance, high windows, lots of space." Mrs. Vaughn nodded. "Good thinking. But we'll need to clear the route first. I've seen at least 3 more of those people wandering the halls." "Then we clear them out," Derek said, picking up half of his broken 2x4. "Just show us where." For the next 30 minutes, Marcus and Derek, along with the gym teacher, Coach Brandon Riley, and the school security guard, an ex-Marine named Frank Howard, went room by room, clearing the hallways of zombies. It was brutal, exhausting work that left Marcus's arms aching and his mind numb from the horror of it all. Each zombie they put down had been a person once, neighbors, friends, strangers who'd just been living their lives that morning. Now they were monsters, driven by nothing but hunger and violence. Coach Riley, a big man who'd played college football before a knee injury ended his career, proved to be invaluable, his size and strength making him a powerhouse against the zombies. Frank Howard moved with military precision, every action deliberate and efficient, his face hard as stone. By noon, they had all the students and staff secured in the gymnasium. Mrs. Vaughn had organized the teachers into groups, some watching the doors, others comforting the kids, a few trying to get information from the outside world via phones and a small TV from the teachers' lounge. What they learned was terrifying. Ashford Springs wasn't the only place under attack. Reports were coming in from all over the state, then from neighboring states, then from across the country. The news anchors looked barely composed as they reported on what they were calling a massive outbreak of unknown origin. The CDC had issued a statement calling it a rapidly spreading pathogen that caused extreme aggression and seemed to be transmitted through bites and bodily fluids. The government was mobilizing the National Guard, establishing safe zones, and urging everyone to stay indoors and avoid contact with the infected. "Infected," Derek scoffed, watching the TV with Marcus. "They can't even say it. They're zombies, man. Actual freaking zombies." Marcus didn't disagree. He'd seen enough movies to recognize what was happening, even if the reality was 1,000 times worse than anything Hollywood had cooked up. His phone rang, his dad. "Marcus, thank God. Where are you?" Robert Webb's voice was strained but controlled. "I'm at the elementary school with Jamie. We've got the kids locked down in the gym. What about you?" "I'm at the store with about 15 people who ran in here when things went south. We're secure for now, but we're hearing things outside. Bad things." "Is Jamie really okay?" "Yeah, Dad. She's fine. We're all fine for now." "Good. Good. Listen, stay where you are. Don't try to move those kids until we know more. I'll try to get to you when things calm down." "Okay. Dad? Be careful. You too, son." As the afternoon wore on, the situation outside got worse. Through the high windows of the gym, they could see smoke rising from different parts of town. The sounds of sirens had been constant for hours but were starting to fade, which somehow seemed more ominous than the noise. Jamie sat with a group of her students, playing quiet games and telling stories to keep them distracted. Sophie Martinez stayed close to Derek, her uncle's presence the only thing keeping her from completely breaking down. Marcus found himself pacing near the entrance, the tire iron still in his hand, his mind unable to rest. Coach Riley joined him, crossing his massive arms over his chest. "Hell of a day," the coach said quietly. "Hell of a day," Marcus agreed. "You ever think you'd be fighting zombies in an elementary school?" "Can't say it was on my bucket list. But here we are." Riley shook his head. "Got a wife and 2 kids at home. Been trying to reach them all day." No answer. His voice cracked slightly. "I'm sure they're okay," Marcus said, even though he had no way of knowing that. "My wife's smart. She'll have locked down the house, gotten the kids somewhere safe." Riley nodded, clearly trying to convince himself. Around 3 o'clock, they got a visitor. Deputy Travis Coleman, looking worse for wear with a cut over his eye and his uniform torn, appeared at the gym entrance. Frank Howard almost didn't let him in until they verified he wasn't infected. "Thank God," Travis said, leaning against the wall once he was inside. "I've been trying to get here for hours. The station got overrun around 11. Chief Donovan." He trailed off, his face going pale. "He didn't make it. Neither did most of the force. I think I'm the only one left." Mrs. Vaughn brought him water and a first aid kit. "What's the situation out there, Deputy?" Travis took a long drink before answering. "It's bad. Real bad. The whole town's infected or infected adjacent. I've seen people I've known my whole life turned into those things. The National Guard is supposed to be setting up a perimeter around the county, but I don't know if they'll make it in time. We're on our own for now." "What about evacuation?" Derek asked. "Can we get the kids out of here?" Travis shook his head. "The roads are clogged with abandoned vehicles and those things are everywhere. Moving this many people, especially kids, would be suicide. Your best bet is to stay put and fortify your position." Marcus didn't like it, but he couldn't argue with the logic. The gym was defensible, they had water from the fountains, and the cafeteria was stocked with food. They could hold out for a while if they had to. "Then we need to make this place a fortress," he said. "Block off any access points we don't absolutely need, create barriers, set up a watch rotation." Travis nodded. "I'll help. And I've got my service weapon and 2 spare magazines. It's not much, but it's better than nothing." Frank Howard spoke up. "I've got a hunting rifle in my truck if it's still in the parking lot. Some ammunition too." "That'll help," Marcus said. "Coach, think you can organize some of the stronger staff members to start moving furniture and equipment to barricade the doors?" Riley nodded. "On it." As the group organized their defenses, Jamie pulled Marcus aside. "How long do you think we'll have to stay here?" He wanted to tell her it would all be over soon, that help was coming, that they'd be home by dinner time. But he'd never lied to his sister, and he wasn't about to start now. "I don't know. Could be days. Could be longer. But we're gonna be okay. We've got supplies, we've got people who know how to fight, and we've got each other." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I'm scared, Marcus." "Me too," he admitted. "But being scared means we're still alive, still thinking. We can work with that." She hugged him tight, and for a moment, they were just kids again. Comforting each other during a thunderstorm like when they were young. The night brought new terrors. The lights in the gym stayed on, powered by the school's backup generator, but outside was pitch black except for the orange glow of fires burning across town. The zombies seemed more active after dark, their groans and shuffling footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. Marcus took the first watch shift along with Frank Howard and Coach Riley. They sat near the main entrance to the gym, weapons ready, ears straining for any sound of trouble. Around midnight, they heard scratching at the doors. Not the frantic pounding of someone trying to get in, but a methodical, persistent scratching like rats in the walls. "They're testing the defenses," Frank said quietly, his Marine training showing. "Seeing if there's a way in." "They're not that smart, are they?" Riley asked. "I mean, they're just mindless corpses, right?" "I don't know what they are," Marcus admitted. "But I'm not taking any chances." The scratching continued for over an hour before finally stopping. Marcus's nerves were frayed, every muscle tense and ready for action. When Derek came to relieve him at 2 a.m., he almost didn't want to leave his post, afraid that the moment he stepped away, something would break through. "Go get some sleep, man," Derek said, clapping him on the shoulder. "I got this." Marcus nodded and made his way to the corner of the gym where they'd set up sleeping areas using gym mats and whatever blankets and coats people had. Jamie was curled up with several of her students, all of them fast asleep despite the circumstances. He found an empty mat and lay down, the tire iron within arm's reach. Sleep came eventually, but it was fitful and filled with nightmares. Day 2 of the outbreak started with a problem. One of the teachers, a middle-aged man named Arthur Green who taught 5th grade, started showing symptoms around dawn. He'd been complaining of feeling sick the night before, but everyone assumed it was stress. Now his skin was turning gray, his eyes were bloodshot, and he was running a fever that had to be over 105 degrees. Mrs. Vaughn made the difficult decision to isolate him in the nurse's office, with Travis standing guard outside. "We can't risk the infection spreading," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Arthur's been with this school for 15 years. He's a good man. But we have to protect the children." Nobody argued, but the mood in the gym turned darker. If Arthur could get infected without being bitten, what did that mean for the rest of them? Travis had a theory. "That cut on his hand," he said, pointing to the bandage Arthur had been wearing yesterday. "He said he cut it on broken glass when he was barricading his classroom. What if there was infected blood on that glass? What if that's how it got him?" It made horrible sense. The pathogen could spread through any exchange of bodily fluids, which meant they all had to be incredibly careful. Marcus made sure everyone knew, any cuts, any scratches, report them immediately and get them thoroughly cleaned and bandaged. They couldn't afford another infection. Around 10 a.m., Arthur Green died. 20 minutes later, he came back. Travis had to put him down, and the sound of the gunshot echoing through the school made several of the kids start crying. It was a grim reminder of what they were up against. By midday, food was becoming a concern. They'd raided the cafeteria the day before, but with 243 kids and 30 adults, supplies were going fast. Marcus, Derek, Frank, and Coach Riley volunteered to make a run to the grocery store a few blocks away. "We'll take my truck," Derek said. "It's got a full tank, and the bed's empty so we can load up." They armed themselves as best they could. Travis loaned his pistol to Frank, who had military firearms training, while the others carried makeshift weapons. Jamie grabbed Marcus before they left. "Please be careful. Please come back." "I will," he promised. "We'll be back before you know it." But as they stepped out of the school into the nightmare that Ashford Springs had become, he wasn't sure if that was a promise he could keep. The town looked like a bomb had hit it. Bodies littered the streets, some still, others twitching and beginning to rise. Cars were crashed into storefronts, blood smeared across windows and pavement. The smoke they'd seen the night before came from at least 3 major fires still burning unchecked. The fire department had apparently been overwhelmed. Derek drove slowly, navigating around obstacles, while the others kept watch. A zombie lunged at the truck from between 2 cars, and Frank leaned out the window to dispatch it with a precise shot to the head. "Save the ammo," Marcus warned. "We've only got so much." "Right," Frank said, settling back into his seat. "Conserve and survive." Murphy's Market was a mess. The front windows were smashed, and supplies were scattered everywhere from looting. But as they cautiously entered, they found the back storage area mostly intact. They worked quickly, loading canned goods, bottled water, bread, peanut butter, anything that would feed a crowd and keep for a while. Coach Riley found a cart full of baby formula and diapers. "There's a couple of infants back at the school with the staff's kids," he explained. "They'll need this." As they loaded the truck bed, they heard engines. A convoy of military vehicles came rumbling down Main Street, Humvees and transport trucks, soldiers in hazmat suits manning machine guns. "The National Guard," Derek said, relief flooding his voice. "Thank God." But the convoy didn't stop. It rolled right through town, heading for what Marcus assumed was the perimeter Travis had mentioned. One of the soldiers saw them and shouted through a megaphone, "Get to shelter. Secure your position. Help is coming." Then they were gone, leaving the four men standing in the parking lot with more questions than answers. "Help is coming," Riley repeated bitterly. "Yeah, well, it better come soon." They finished loading the truck and headed back to the school, encountering only a handful of zombies on the way. Each one they avoided was a small victory. When they pulled into the school parking lot, Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest. They'd made it. They'd actually made it back. The supplies they brought boosted morale considerably. Mrs. Vaughn organized rationing to make everything last as long as possible, and the kids got a decent meal for the first time since the outbreak started. As Marcus ate a peanut butter sandwich and watched the children play quiet games in the corner of the gym, he felt a strange mix of hope and despair. Hope because they were still alive, still fighting. Despair because he had no idea how long they could keep this up. That evening, they got their first real communication from the outside world. Travis's police radio, which had been mostly static, suddenly crackled to life with an official broadcast. "Attention all survivors in the Ashford County area. This is Colonel Benjamin Hayes of the Pennsylvania National Guard. We have established a secure zone at the Riverside Military Base, 40 miles north of your position. If you can safely travel, we are accepting refugees. Repeat, Riverside Military Base is secure and accepting refugees. Travel only in daylight, stay on major roads, and avoid all contact with the infected. Good luck, and God bless." 40 miles. In normal times, that would be less than an hour's drive. Now, with the roads clogged and zombies everywhere, it might as well be on the moon. "We could do it," Derek said, ever the optimist. "We could get buses, convoy style, make a run for it." "With 200 kids?" Travis shook his head. "One breakdown, one attack, and the whole thing falls apart. It's too risky." "So what, we just stay here forever?" Derek challenged. "We stay here until we have a better option or until staying becomes more dangerous than going," Mrs. Vaughn said firmly. "These children are my responsibility, and I won't risk their lives on a gamble." The debate raged for an hour, voices getting heated, but eventually, they agreed to wait. They'd fortify the school, conserve supplies, and monitor the situation. If things got worse, they'd reconsider the evacuation. Days 3 and 4 passed in a blur of routine punctuated by moments of terror. The zombies seemed to be multiplying, drawn to the school by the noise and lights. Twice they had to repel serious attempts to break in, using everything from boiling water from the cafeteria to Molotov cocktails made from cleaning supplies. Marcus discovered he had a talent for improvised weapons, creating spears from mop handles and knives from the cafeteria, reinforced clubs from table legs wrapped in duct tape. Derek proved to be an excellent shot with the rifle Frank had retrieved from his truck, picking off zombies from the high windows with grim efficiency. Coach Riley became their chief strategist, his tactical mind helping them anticipate and counter the zombies' mindless but persistent attacks. Jamie, meanwhile, became the heart of their little community, keeping the kids' spirits up with games and stories, maintaining a sense of normalcy in a world gone mad. On day 5, Robert Webb showed up. Marcus was on watch when he saw his dad's pickup truck pulling into the parking lot, horn honking to scatter the zombies that had been milling around. "Dad," he shouted, waving from the window. They opened the gym entrance just long enough for Robert and his group to sprint inside, 15 people total, including Mrs. Kelly from the bakery, young Tommy Briggs who worked at the gas station, not Zombie Tommy, his cousin, and old Mr. Patterson who'd lived in Ashford Springs since before Marcus was born. Robert grabbed both his kids in a fierce hug. "Thank God you're okay. I've been trying to get here for days, but the streets were impossible." "How'd you manage it?" Jamie asked. "Sheer stubbornness," Mrs. Kelly said with a tired smile. "And your father's refusal to let a few dozen zombies stand between him and his children." Robert's group brought news from other parts of town. The hardware store had eventually been overrun, but not before they'd salvaged tools and supplies. They'd holed up in the police station for 2 days before making their way here. "Most of downtown is lost," Robert reported to the assembled group. "Fires spreading unchecked in the Western District, and there's got to be thousands of those things wandering around. But we saw signs of other survivors, lights in windows, barricaded buildings. We're not alone in this." The news was simultaneously comforting and heartbreaking. Other people were alive and fighting, but the town they all known and loved was gone, consumed by death and flame. That night, Marcus found himself unable to sleep again. He stood at the window, looking out at the burning town, trying to process everything that had happened in less than a week. Derek joined him, 2 bottles of water in hand. He passed one to Marcus and leaned against the wall. "You ever think about how we were complaining about being bored last week?" Derek said. "I'd kill for boring right now." Marcus laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Yeah, me too. I'd take cold eggs and paint cans any day over this." They stood in silence for a moment before Derek spoke again. "We're gonna make it through this, right? All of us?" Marcus wanted to say yes, wanted to be confident and reassuring. But he'd seen too much, lost too much of his illusions about how this would turn out. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But we're gonna fight like hell to try." Day 6 brought a crisis that nearly broke them. One of the children, a 7-year-old boy named Timothy Walsh, had been running a fever. Everyone had been watching him carefully, terrified of another infection, but his mother, one of the staff members, insisted it was just a cold. By morning, though, Timothy was worse, not turning into a zombie, but genuinely sick, possibly with pneumonia. He needed real medical attention, the kind they couldn't provide in a school gym. Travis knew of a doctor, Rebecca Martinez, Derek's aunt, as it turned out, who'd been running a clinic out of the old church on Maple Street. "If she's still alive, she might be able to help," Travis said. "But it's a solid half-mile from here, through some of the most infested areas of town." "I'll go," Derek said immediately. "She's my aunt. I know the church. I can make it there and back." "Not alone, you won't," Marcus said. "I'm coming with you." Frank and Coach Riley volunteered as well, and before anyone could argue further, the 4 of them were gearing up for what might be a suicide mission. They left at dawn, moving on foot because Derek's truck would make too much noise. Each man carried weapons. Frank had the rifle, Travis had loaned Derek his pistol, and Marcus and Riley had machetes they'd made from sheet metal and wooden handles. The journey was terrifying. Zombies were everywhere, shambling through the streets, clustered around buildings, feeding on the unfortunate few who hadn't made it to safety. The group moved silently, using hand signals Frank taught them, avoiding contact whenever possible. When they had to fight, they did so quickly and quietly, putting down zombies with precise strikes and moving on before more could arrive. Marcus's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst, adrenaline and fear mixing into a cocktail that kept him hyper-alert and razor-focused. The church came into view after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. The building was fortified with boards over the windows and furniture piled against the doors. A handmade sign hung on the front, "Survivors inside." "Knock 3 times, identify yourself, wait." Derek knocked 3 times and called out, "Aunt Becky?" "It's Derek Martinez. I've got people with me, all clean, no bites. We need help." For a long moment, nothing. Then the sound of furniture being moved, and the door cracked open. A woman in her 50s with Derek's same dark eyes peered out. "Derek? Oh my God, Derek!" She pulled him inside, and the others followed quickly. The church was packed with survivors, at least 50 people, Marcus estimated, ranging from infants to elderly. Dr. Rebecca Martinez had set up a makeshift clinic in what used to be the Sunday school rooms, treating injuries and illnesses with limited supplies but unlimited determination. Derek explained about Timothy, and Rebecca grabbed her medical bag immediately. "I'll come back with you. That boy needs antibiotics and proper care." "Aunt Becky, it's dangerous out there," Derek protested. "You could get killed." "I'm a doctor," she said simply. "That boy needs me, so I go. Now, let's not waste time arguing." The trip back was even more harrowing than the trip there because now they had Dr. Martinez to protect. She was fit for her age but not a fighter, and she struggled to keep up the brutal pace. Twice they had to hide, pressing themselves into doorways and holding their breath as groups of zombies passed by. Once, a zombie came so close to Marcus that he could smell the decay, could see the remnants of the person it had been in the tattered clothes and wedding ring. His hand tightened on his machete, ready to strike, but the thing wandered past without noticing them. They made it back to the school by mid-morning. Rebecca immediately went to work on Timothy, administering antibiotics and fluids while his mother watched with tears streaming down her face. "He's going to be okay," Rebecca assured her after the initial examination. "It's pneumonia, but we caught it in time. He'll need to rest and stay warm, but he'll pull through." The relief in the gym was palpable. It was a small victory, one child's life saved, but in a world full of death, it felt monumental. That night, they celebrated Timothy's recovery with slightly larger food portions and a talent show the kids put on, singing songs and telling jokes. For a few hours, they could almost forget the nightmare outside. Day 7 marked a week since the outbreak began. The National Guard broadcast came again, this time with updated information. The infection is contained within designated red zones. Do not attempt to leave red zones without military escort. Rescue operations are ongoing. If you are in a secure location, remain there. Repeat, remain in place. Help is coming. Ashford Springs was definitely in a red zone. But the promise of rescue gave everyone hope. Maybe they wouldn't have to make the dangerous 40-mile journey. Maybe help would come to them. That hope was shattered around noon when they saw helicopters flying over the town, not rescue helicopters, but military attack choppers. Moments later, explosions rocked the area as they began bombing the most heavily infested parts of town. The message was clear: the military was prioritizing containment over rescue. They were on their own. The bombing continued sporadically for 2 days, the sound of distant explosions a constant reminder that the world they'd known was being systematically destroyed. On day 9, they made the decision to try for the Riverside military base. Staying was no longer safer than going, their supplies were running low, the building was taking damage from stray fires spreading across town, and the constant zombie attacks were wearing everyone down. Mrs. Vaughn addressed the group. "We'll take 3 school buses. The maintenance staff has been working to reinforce them with metal plating and wire mesh over the windows. Each bus will have armed escorts. We'll leave at dawn tomorrow, take Route 23 north, and pray we make it." It was far from a perfect plan, but it was all they had. That final night in the school, Marcus sat with his family, his dad, his sister, Derek, who'd become like a brother. They talked about their memories of Ashford Springs, the town that had been their home. The Friday night football games, the summer festivals, the simple, boring, beautiful normalcy they'd taken for granted. "We'll rebuild," Robert said firmly. "When this is over, when they clear out the infection, we'll come back and rebuild." Marcus wanted to believe that. He wanted to believe there would be an after, a time when they could reclaim their lives. But he also knew that even if they survived, even if they made it to safety, they would never be the same people who'd drunk coffee at Miller's Diner and complained about being bored. The outbreak had changed them, transformed them from peaceful citizens into survivors, fighters, people who'd seen the worst humanity in the world had to offer and kept going anyway. Dawn came cold and clear. The buses were loaded with everything they could carry: food, water, medical supplies, weapons. The children were divided among the 3 buses, with teachers and parents spread out to keep them calm. The fighters, Marcus, Derek, Frank, Coach Riley, Travis, Robert, and a handful of others who'd proven themselves capable, positioned themselves strategically, ready to defend against attacks. Dr. Martinez set up a medical station on the middle bus, ready to treat injuries. Mrs. Vaughn took one last look at the school where she'd worked for 23 years, her eyes wet with unshed tears. Then she climbed aboard the lead bus and gave the signal. It was time to go. The convoy pulled out of the parking lot, slowly navigating through the debris-strewn streets. Zombies immediately took notice, their groans filling the air as they shambled toward the buses. But the vehicles were heavy and reinforced, and they pushed through the crowds of undead like icebreakers through frozen seas. Marcus rode on the roof of the rear bus with Derek and Frank, watching for threats, his machete in hand. The town passed by below them, Murphy's Market where this nightmare had really begun for them, the construction site where they'd been working just over a week ago, the diner with its broken windows and blood-stained counter. All of it damaged, all of it changed forever. They made it to Route 23 and turned north. The highway was clogged with abandoned vehicles, and they had to drive on the shoulder, sometimes even off-road to get around the worst of the congestion. Several times they had to stop and clear obstacles, the fighters jumping down to push cars aside or dispatch zombies while the buses waited, engines running. Each stop was agony, every second feeling like an invitation for disaster. Around mile 15, disaster found them. A massive pileup blocked the entire highway, and as they slowed to find a way around, zombies poured out of the woods on both sides. "Go, go, go!" Travis shouted, and the buses gunned their engines, trying to maneuver around the obstruction. But the lead bus got stuck, its wheels spinning in the soft earth of the shoulder. The zombies were on them in seconds. Marcus jumped down from the roof, machete swinging, putting down one zombie after another. Derek was beside him, the pistol barking, each shot finding its mark. Frank's rifle cracked steadily, providing cover fire. Coach Riley wielded a fire axe like a berserker, his face twisted in fury and determination. Inside the buses, people were screaming, the kids crying in terror as dead hands slapped against the windows. "We need to push the bus," Robert shouted, organizing a group of men. They put their backs into it, straining against the weight while the fighters kept the zombies at bay. Marcus's arms burned with exhaustion, his breathing ragged, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. If they failed here, if the buses were overwhelmed, everything they'd survived would be for nothing. Finally, with a lurch, the lead bus broke free. "Load up!" Mrs. Vaughn screamed, and the fighters scrambled back aboard. Marcus was the last one, grabbing the ladder on the back of the rear bus as it started moving. Derek pulled him up, and they collapsed on the roof, gasping for breath. Behind them, the horde of zombies was still pursuing, but they were falling behind, unable to match the speed of the buses. They'd made it through. Bloody, exhausted, traumatized, but alive. The rest of the journey was tense but uneventful. They passed through empty towns and burning cities, saw other survivors waving from barricaded buildings, saw evidence of military operations both successful and failed. But they kept moving, kept pushing north, mile after grueling mile. When the Riverside military base finally came into view, with its high walls and armed guards, people started crying. They'd made it. Against all odds, through hell itself, they'd actually made it. The buses pulled up to the checkpoint, where soldiers in hazmat suits checked each person for bites and signs of infection. One by one, they were cleared and allowed through the gates into the safe zone. Marcus walked through with his family, looking back one last time at the road they'd traveled. Somewhere back there was Ashford Springs, the town where he'd grown up, the place he'd called home. It was gone now, consumed by the outbreak, maybe forever. But he was alive. They were all alive. And that meant there was still hope, still a chance to rebuild, to create something new from the ashes of what they'd lost. As they were led to the refugee area, Jamie took his hand. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "We actually survived." "Yeah," Marcus said, squeezing her hand. We did. Around them, the transformation was complete. They'd started as ordinary people living ordinary lives in a peaceful civilization. The outbreak had changed everything, turning their world into a nightmare, forcing them to become fighters, survivors, people capable of facing unimaginable horror and coming through the other side. They'd lost their town, their normal lives, their innocence about how cruel the world could be. But they'd gained something too: strength, resilience, the unbreakable bonds forged in fire and blood. The zombie uprising had transformed their civilization from peace to panic, but it hadn't destroyed their humanity. And as long as they held on to that, Marcus thought, there was still a chance for the future.